For now, in fact, this story links up quite nicely, but perhaps disturbingly, with the story that we're going to next. Police often resort to using rubber bullets to control crowds. This was seen in the recent riots and violence that we saw in July in this country. Let me bring into the conversation now Thato Masiangoako from the organization SERI, that's the Socio-Economic Rights Institute. And Thato, thank you. So this conversation also comes off the back of the commemoration of the Marikana massacre, which was perhaps a case study of how not to manage protests and crowds in South Africa. But it also comes off the backdrop of what we saw happening in July, where it seemed that, the police response in terms of public order policing was at 6s and 7s. Talk to me about the default weapon that you found in the study that you did that's entitled Double Harm. You found that rubber bullets seem to be the default, weapon for South African police services. Unpack that for me.
Sure. So during the student protests in 2015, 2016, and in other crowd management incidents, what we find is that the police frequently resort to using rubber bullets, often prematurely. National Instruction 4 of 2014 states that rubber bullets should only be used in extreme circumstances. And in fact, using it as a dispersal weapon is profoundly problematic because you're not targeting a specific individual who may be posing an imminent threat. And so what we found is that many people have suffered terrible injuries as a result of the use of rubber bullets. And those injuries can be really profound and can change people's lives forever. During the lockdown, where one woman was in Philippi, Cape Town, she was just going to collect water, and I think there was unrest in the area. And as the police were driving by, they just fired at her, and she lost the use of her eye. And so the problem with just using such a dangerous weapon that is inherently indiscriminate is a great danger for all members of the public.
Is it inherently indiscriminate, the weapon itself, or is it used indiscriminately? If you understand what I'm saying, is the problem with the technology or with the users of the technology in the form of the South African Police Service?
That's a good question, and my answer to that is both. They are used indiscriminately, so they're fired into a crowd, and often the purpose of that is to get people to disperse quite quickly. But the weapon on its own, multiple projectile weapons, are inherently indiscriminate, and this is found in the UN guidelines on the use of less lethal weapons, is that two projectiles that are fired in quick succession, it is a problem, because while you can aim the weapon in a particular direction, there is no control over where that second projectile goes. And so what the Double Harm report documents is people who have been injured, not necessarily because they were directly targeted, but because a weapon, because a projectile ricocheted, or because, there's just no control over that second projectile. So the weapon on its own is indiscriminate, and it is used indiscriminately.
So part of the conversation we were having yesterday as we were commemorating the Marikana massacre was about whether or not the recommendations of the Farlam Commission of Inquiry have been implemented, and some of those include improvements, significant improvements that were supposed to be made to public order policing. There was a whole panel that looked at that area of policing, but it seems progress is really at snail's pace. How important is it that this progress is expedited, that we don't continue to see scenes such as the ones you describe where people are losing their eyes, and we had the case of Mthokozi Sintumba, for example, in March, who was killed in clashes between police and protesting students in Braamfontein?
Yeah. So the Farlam Commission of Inquiry had a number of recommendations after it sat and looked at what happened at Marikana. One of those recommendations was that an expert an expert panel be established to look into public order and crowd management in South Africa. That panel of experts was assembled in 2016, and they sat for about a period of 2 years, put together a report which the Minister of Police received, I think, in 2018. He made that report public this year, shortly after Thokozisi Ntumba was killed. And so that panel of experts report contains about 136 recommendations, which span from professionalizing the police force, demilitarizing the police force, the importance of accountability, the importance of intelligence and using intelligence appropriately, the kinds of weapons that the police should use. So it is extensive. And what we need at this point is that the police ministry adopts the panel of experts report as policy, first step, and that the Civilian Secretariat for Police Services plays its role in supporting the police ministry to ensure that we have, time-bound, very clear time-bound goals in terms of implementing these recommendations. So far, we can have the Minister of Police, go onto the media and say, we've learned from Marikana, we have recommendations, we're doing things, but we actually have to see that. And so the important additional aspect of this would be that the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee also steps in holding the police ministry accountable and having them report on exactly what the progress is in terms of implementing the recommendations of the panel of experts report.
All right, Thato Masiangoako from SIRI, thank you so much for your insights here. And I do hope we continue to have this conversation about how crowds are policed in South Africa. Is anyone listening, though? Is anyone listening? How long have we been talking about these issues? Is anyone going to pick this up and champion it? And we see real progress, as Thato was describing there, with time-bound goals and targets of what is to be done by when around issues of improving public order policing in this country with thousands of protests every year.